The first thing I saw that evening was not the patrol cars. It was the red and blue light flashing across the surface of my lake. For a second, I stood on the ladder and just stared. Lake Norman was calm that night, so calm the lights looked like they were sliding over black glass. I had been repairing an old railing near the dock, replacing cedar boards that had been there since my wife, Claire, was still alive. The smell of fresh wood was still on my hands when I heard tires slowing near my front gate. That was unusual. Nobody came down Whitaker Lane by accident. I climbed down, wiped my hands on an old rag, and looked through the trees. 2 sheriff's cars had stopped outside my gate. Behind them, a small crowd from the subdivision next door had gathered with phones in their hands. And at the center of it all stood Marble Vickers. Marble was the acting president of Silverglass Shores HOA, and she looked exactly like a woman who believed the whole world was her board meeting. She had sunglasses on after sunset, a phone in her hand, and a smile sharp enough to cut rope. Then I heard her say it. The trespasser is still inside. Trespasser. That word made me step off the gravel path and stop. Because the land she was talking about was mine. 11 acres. Private deed. Taxes paid every year. My family had owned Whitaker Point since 1974. But according to Marble Vickers, I was trespassing on my own property. That was her first mistake. I walked toward the gate, slowly. The deputies stepped out of their cars. Marble pointed at me like she had caught a burglar climbing through a window. "That's him," she said. "He is occupying HOA-controlled lakefront property and refusing lawful requests to leave." A few residents nodded. A few looked confused. One older man lowered his phone like he suddenly realized this might not go the way he expected. I did not interrupt. 34 years in law enforcement taught me that people who lie usually need space to do it properly. So I let her talk. She claimed I was blocking community access. She claimed residents felt unsafe. She claimed the HOA had authority over the shoreline. Every sentence sounded official. Every sentence was wrong. Then one deputy stepped into the light. Nolan Price. I had trained Nolan when he was a rookie. Back then he was nervous, respectful, and smart enough to listen. I taught him one rule he never forgot. Never believe the first story just because it was told loudly. He looked at me, then at the gate, then at Marble. I nodded. "Evening, Deputy Price." His face changed. For a moment, nobody breathed. Then he turned to Marble and said, carefully, "Ma'am, did you just report Sheriff Whitaker as a trespasser?" The whole crowd went silent. Even the lake sounded quiet. Marble's smile finally cracked. That was the moment everyone began to understand something important. This was not an argument about manners. It was an argument about ownership. But to understand how we got there, you need to understand what Whitaker Point meant to me. Most people saw that land and saw money. Realtors saw lakefront acreage. Developers saw luxury homes. Investors saw millions. I saw my father carrying lumber in the rain. I saw my mother planting flowers near the porch. I saw Claire sitting at the end of the dock with iced tea in her hand, watching the sun disappear behind the trees. My father bought the property in 1974, when the lake still felt wild. There were no gated subdivisions beside us then. No HOA boards, no glossy brochures promising exclusive lake living. There was only water, pine trees, and a road that turned to mud every time it rained. The house was not fancy. It grew slowly, one room at a time. My father built the first porch. I added the back room after Claire and I married. Later, when Claire had her stroke, I widened doorways, built ramps, and added railings everywhere her hands might need them. For 6 years, that house became more than a home. It became the place I fought to keep my wife comfortable. Some days were good. She would sit on the porch and watch the water without saying a word. Some days were not. But as long as she could see the lake, I believed I was doing something right. When Claire passed, the silence inside that house became heavier than any call I had answered as sheriff. Still, I never thought about selling. Developers came anyway. Letters arrived. Offers arrived. Men in clean shoes stood at my gate and talked about potential. I told them all the same thing. Not interested. Most left. Silverglass Shores did not. The subdivision appeared slowly beyond the trees. First came machines, then paved roads, then expensive houses with perfect lawns. I ignored it until an envelope with the Silverglass Shores logo appeared in my mailbox. Inside was a welcome packet. That confused me because I did not live in Silverglass Shores. My property was not inside their boundary. The county maps were clear. Still, I opened it. The brochure inside showed smiling families enjoying lake life. One photo stopped me cold. It was my dock. Not a similar dock. My actual dock. The same dock Claire loved. The brochure called it part of future waterfront lifestyle opportunities. It never said they owned it, but it made sure buyers believed something was coming. That was the beginning. A week later, Marble Vickers arrived in a white SUV with a leather folder and a polished smile. "Mr. Whitaker," she said, "we would like to discuss community access." I asked her what kind. The dock, the shoreline, maybe events in the future. nothing unreasonable. When someone says nothing unreasonable, they are usually about to ask for something unreasonable. I told her no, politely but clearly. Private property, no easement, no access agreement, no community dock. Her smile faded for half a second. Cooperation benefits everyone, she said. Sometimes, I answered. But ownership still matters. She left that day, but she did not accept it. Soon residents started showing up near my shoreline. Golf carts slowed at my gate. People took photographs. One couple even thanked me for supporting the community marina project. I had never heard of a community marina project. Then orange survey stakes appeared beside my driveway. Each one had a ribbon that read, Community Access. I pulled them out and saved them. Evidence has a way of becoming useful later. A few days after that, Marble arrived with a group of residents carrying clipboards. They stood near my gate, pointing toward my water, measuring distances, and making notes like they were planning a construction project. I asked what they were doing. Marble smiled. Future recreational planning? For who? The community. There it was again, the community, never the owner. When I reminded her the land was private, she pulled out her phone and started recording me. Transparency is important, she said. That was when I understood her game. She was not trying to solve anything. She was trying to create a performance. She wanted video of me looking angry so she could call me difficult. She wanted residents to believe I was the obstacle standing between them and the lake access they had been promised. But she forgot one thing. A story is only powerful until documents arrive. There is something strange about watching people argue over land they have never worked on, fences they never repaired, taxes they never paid, and memories they never lived. They talk about it like a feature on a brochure. They point at it like it is a community asset waiting to be claimed. But land is not just dirt and trees when your whole life is buried in it. It carries footsteps. It carries grief. It carries promises you made to people who are no longer there to hear you keep them. That was why I stayed calm. Not because I was weak, not because I was confused. I stayed calm because I knew exactly what was mine, and I knew the paper trail would prove it. Marble believed pressure could wear a person down. She believed embarrassment, public meetings, warning letters, and police calls could make me surrender, something my family had protected for decades. What she did not understand was that quiet people are not always scared. Sometimes they are simply waiting for the truth to become impossible to ignore. And the longer she pushed, the more careful I became. Every notice went into a folder. Every screenshot was printed. Every conversation was dated. I had spent too many years around courtrooms to underestimate a clean timeline. The first residents I found standing on my dock were not rude. That made it worse. They were ordinary homeowners who honestly believed they had been told the truth. One man looked shocked when I said I owned the dock. We were told this was becoming shared property, he said. A woman beside him added, the sales presentation made it sound like access was already being finalized. That sentence bothered me more than anything Marble had said, because now people had paid money based on something that did not exist. Over the next few weeks, homeowners began approaching me. A retired couple said they paid extra for a premium lot because of future lake access. A widow told me she bought into Silverglass Shores because she believed the promised amenities would increase her property value. Then, the HOA created a lake access reserve fund. Residents were asked to pay extra dues for future shoreline improvements. That was when the problem stopped being annoying and started looking dangerous. A resident named Walter Jenkins called me after one HOA meeting. Walter was a retired school principal, careful with his words and not easily excited. Everett, he said, you need to know what they're telling people. We met for coffee the next morning. He explained that Marble had shown maps, slides, and photos of my shoreline during a community presentation. She talked about future amenities and protecting home values. She never showed a deed. She never showed an easement. But the way she spoke made people believe the matter was already handled. Confidence can sell a lie faster than evidence can catch it. Another resident, Earl Dawson, saw it too. Earl had spent 22 years in the Army and had no patience for polished nonsense. He told me, every time someone asks for paperwork, they get another speech. That stuck with me. In property matters, paperwork is everything. So I went to the county records office. By lunchtime, I had copies of the deeds, surveys, plats, easement records, tax history, and development filings. The truth was simple. Whitaker Point belonged to me. There was no HOA ownership, no recorded easement, no access agreement, no transfer, nothing. Silverglass Shores had no legal claim to my land. I took the records to Nora Pike, a property attorney I trusted. Nora had handled title disputes for nearly 40 years and could smell weak paperwork from across the room. She reviewed everything quietly. Then she said, Everett, they don't have a property problem. They have a documentation problem. She explained that if the HOA had encouraged residents to expect access without secured rights, then the issue was bigger than a neighborly disagreement. It involved money, marketing, and possibly misleading homeowners. Before I left, Nora gave me simple advice. Don't argue, let them keep talking. So I did, and they talked. Emails were forwarded to me. Meeting notes appeared in my mailbox. Screenshots from HOA planning groups started circulating among concerned residents. One message from the treasurer changed everything. It said the waterfront property issue remained unresolved and access rights had not yet been secured. Not yet secured. That meant someone inside the HOA knew the truth. Yet the reserve fund continued, the notices continued, the sales language continued. Then Walter showed me a planning document titled Future Community Waterfront Integration Strategy. It described pathways, kayak racks, boating programs, and gathering areas, all depending on my property. Near the bottom, one sentence stood out. Ownership issues were expected to be resolved through pressure and negotiations. Pressure, not purchase, not agreement. Pressure. That told me exactly how Marble saw me, not as a landowner, not as a neighbor, as something to be pushed aside. The final piece came in an internal email. A board member asked whether legal rights had been secured. Marble replied, not yet, but resistance is weakening. Resistance. That was me. By then, I was no longer collecting papers. I was building a timeline, and Marble was helping me build it. The night everything came apart, Silverglass Shores held a special community meeting. The notice said it was about ongoing compliance concerns and protecting community interests. The clubhouse was packed. Homeowners filled every chair. Others stood along the walls. A projector showed slides about community values and future planning. Marble stood at the front like she owned the room. Maybe she did. For a while. She began with routine updates, then shifted toward unresolved waterfront issues. My name appeared on the screen. People turned to look at me. I stayed seated. For 20 minutes, Marble talked about delays, obstruction, and refusal to cooperate. She said certain individuals were ignoring lawful HOA authority. She never said deed. She never said easement. She never said recorded access. Then she announced she had contacted law enforcement to handle the issue properly. The room stirred. 10 minutes later, Deputy Nolan Price walked in. Marble looked relieved. That relief did not last. She handed Nolan a folder she called her enforcement packet. He opened it and read quietly. Notices, policies, meeting minutes, committee reports. Plenty of paper. No ownership. Finally, Nolan looked up. Do you have a recorded deed showing HOA ownership of the property? And Marble blinked. The community has established interests, she said. Nolan asked again. Do you have a deed? She talked about future plans. He asked about easements. She talked about expectations. He asked about recorded access rights. She changed the subject. That was when I stood up. I walked to the front with a plain manila envelope and handed it to Nolan. Inside were certified records from the county, deeds, surveys, tax records, easement searches, title history, facts. Nolan reviewed them, then turned toward the room. The property being discussed tonight is privately owned, he said. County records show no HOA ownership, no HOA easement, and no HOA access rights. The room went still. Then everyone turned toward Marble. The story she had built for months collapsed without a single raised voice, because the documents spoke louder than she ever could. After that meeting, Silverglass Shores changed quickly. Homeowners demanded financial records for the Lake Access Reserve Fund. They requested meeting minutes, planning documents, and copies of the materials used in sales presentations. The reserve fund was frozen pending review. An independent audit later found that money had been collected for lake projects tied to assumptions not supported by recorded property rights. People were angry, not just because of the money, because they felt used. Brochures changed, website language changed, sales presentations changed. References to future waterfront opportunities quietly disappeared. As for Marble, she resigned before the season ended. Some said she was overwhelmed. Some said she knew what was coming. I do not know. What I do know is that her confidence never came back. Life at Whitaker Point slowly returned to normal. The signs disappeared. The golf cart stopped. Nobody wandered onto my dock with a camera anymore. Peace returned to the water. Almost a year later, I held a small workshop at the local library about deeds, easements, surveys, and public records. More than 40 people came, including several from Silverglass Shores. Claire would have liked that. She always believed knowledge solved more problems than anger. That evening, I sat on the old dock and watched the sun settle behind the trees. The empty chair beside me still hurt to look at, but the lake was quiet again. And I thought about how close everything came to turning out differently. The lesson was not about beating an HOA. It was about patience. It was about records. It was about knowing your rights before someone else tries to define them for you. People can argue with opinions all day. They can repeat rumors. They can speak loudly enough to sound official. But paperwork has a way of making loud people quiet. And at Whitaker Point, that is exactly what happened